Greg Strauss is a husband, father, and senior vice president with AB Biotek, a technology-driven company specializing in fermentation science. With 33 years of experience in industry-leading organizations like the Coca-Cola Company and Associated British Foods, Greg's success leverages broad and deep expertise in sales, marketing, operations, and people management. Tonight, we discuss leadership principles that influence consistent results from the boardroom to the front line as we enjoy Wilderness Trail bottled in Bond Bourbon Whiskey. This is straight talk you won't hear anywhere else. I'm Galen Bingham, and this is the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Cheers. Boy, that's good. All right, well, you guys know what time it is, right? It is time for another episode of Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. And, you know, this time I'm talking with someone whom I have known for a while. I mean, gosh, when I do the math, we're going to have to start counting decades. When I start thinking about leaders who I have actually seen go from strategy, high level, what do we want to do from macro level, all the way down to how do we make sure the truck runs on time? This guy, I have seen him do it. There's a lot of people that I know of and that I've read about and that I've studied who have done it, but this is a guy I've seen do it. And not only is he an incredible leader, but he actually brought me a bottle of bourbon. So he's itching up the charts for being one of my favorite leaders. So Greg Strauss, come on into the conversation, man. Welcome to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. How you doing, man?
Oh, fantastic, Galen. What a blast to be on this show. I have certainly listened to a number of your podcasts. And when you asked me a couple of weeks ago to do it, yeah, I felt honored. And so thank you. I hope I can live up to everything you just gave as a wonderful intro. So thank you.
Oh, man, I know you can. Well, first of all, I'm going to do something. This is something that I've never done on podcast. I'm going to actually crack open this bottle, peel back the plastic. It's never been anywhere near open here.
Hey, so Galen, while you're opening it, do you want me to give you a little bit of background on it?
Tell me a little bit about what I'm getting ready to get into, because this is Wilderness Trail. It is a bourbon whiskey bottled in Bond, 100 proof. So this is some grown folk stuff here. Yeah, definitely. Tell me what's going on with this.
Yeah. So first of all, I learned something as well. Even though I'm kind of in the business, I'm in the yeast fermentation business. So we do a lot of fermented beverages. But I got to admit, recently, having picked up that bottle, I did learn what bottled in bond actually means, and it's interesting. It has a couple of very specific points that require for that to have that term. So the first is the bourbon has to be aged at least 4 years and bottled at precisely 100 proof, or obviously 50% alcohol by volume. And it also can only be made by one distiller, because oftentimes you'll have blends and everything. It can only be made by one distiller at a single distillery in one season and then aged in a bonded warehouse. And that's really the definition of bottled in bond. That's a rare exception, right? The majority are all kinds of different classifications, but so this is actually a pretty special bottle. The other thing about Wilderness Trail, they're located in Danville, Kentucky. They've been in business. They broke ground back in 2013. And this distillery is the most recent addition to the Bourbon Trail. And in fact, they came online as part of the Bourbon Trail and actually got their distillery put on the map in March of 2020. And everybody kind of knows what happens then with COVID. So that's been a little bit tough from a tourism standpoint, but they're starting to come back online and they're in 33 states. And I was out in Kentucky on business a couple of weeks ago. I picked up this small batch bourbon and fell in love with it. It's 24% rye, so it's a high rye, 64% corn, and 12% malted barley.
Wow.
I also have a glass here, so maybe I cheers you online.
I'll tell you what. Let me go ahead and give this the. First of all, I got to give this the pour test, right? Let's see if it wakes up. Boy, that. Oh my gosh, the bouquet is okay. All right, I see. Hold on, I got to taste it here. What is it?
All right.
Oh man, that is real. Oh my gosh, that is really, really good. I brought a couple of cubes just in case, but I don't know that I can even. I think cubes might actually interfere with what this has got going on. Hey, you know what? That the guy that was ahead of you on my favorite leader list, he just got knocked off.
Right, perfect.
He just got knocked off. This is really nice. Let's get into this conversation, and I've shared just a little bit about your background, and I could talk forever about how you and I have met, but I would just love for you to just share a little bit about what you've done, because you have been at this leadership thing for over 30 years. And, as I said before, a lot of leaders that I met can play in the boardroom, right? And they can talk about strategy, and they can do a really, really good job of talking about the big picture. And then you got some leaders that they don't really feel comfortable in the boardroom, but boy, you get them out where the action happens, and they're really, really good at motivating the troops and making people understand why they need to take that hill. You have been one of the rare people that I've seen that feel just as comfortable in the field as you do in the boardroom. And I would just love to know where that has come from. What benefits do you see from being able to understand the nuts and bolts, as well as being able to read the diagram of how the plane is actually built?
Yeah, well, thanks. So, and you're right. You and I go way back. I was kind of mid in my Coca-Cola career at that time when we met, and I tell you, that was a tremendous foundation in terms of not only learning, coming to appreciate the value of strong work ethic and recognizing that in people, leading by example. And in an organization like the Coca-Cola system, both on the parent company side as well as on the bottling distribution side, very hierarchical. And so you were given the opportunity to rise through the ranks by delivering results. And you can't learned a long time ago, for probably the first 10 years of my working career, I was an individual contributor. But what I found where it was really a launch to my career is when I found working through people enabled me to achieve tremendous amount more. It's like a fulcrum, right? It's much, much higher leverage. And so if you can embody that same pride in a job well done and in the company you represent, the products you're selling, it goes a long, long way. And that was a fantastic foundation. Number of different positions in the Coke system. Things changed. The organization changed, the structure changed, and so the point that I had reached at that point back in 2007 really wasn't available anymore due to structural changes. I could have certainly stayed with the Coke system, but opted not to, just from a career pathing standpoint. And what I would have never anticipated at the time when I left Coke and looked to get into a different company. I view that as kind of a stopgap. But one of the divisions of Associated British Foods is a company called AB Mauri that does, among other things, Fleischmann's yeast, which a lot of people would be very familiar with in this country. International global company, but really focused me to pivot and become a student and relearn. If you'd asked me 15 years ago, where was I going to retire? It would have been with Coke, right? But things changed. And so you adapt, you recreate yourself. And that's absolutely in the mid 2000s, it was a period of recreating myself. But still being able to rely upon the foundation of the previous years. And so the same discipline, the same commitment to excellence, the same leading, teaching, and coaching of people carried forward. And so I learned a new industry, the baking industry. And of the 7 years that I managed bakery, we either met or exceeded our operating plan by 5 out of 7 years. And so it was tremendously successful. So much so that I had to recreate myself again. About 6 years ago, I was asked by the company to step out of that role, that bakery sales and customer service role, and start a new business unit. And I did. So I went from managing a team of 20 people and $250 million to literally for a year, nobody and nothing, right? So I spent a lot of time building business cases on where to play and how to win and what areas, what industries could our manufacturing footprint service, and built a business model around it. And so there was a mini startup certainly within a safety net of a larger corporation. And so I did have the investment and the backing of a big company, but it was a little daunting at first, but again, applying the same leadership principles, and being humble enough to say, I don't have all the answers. And so, what's been amazing really throughout my career is customers. I've always gravitated to customers. I think you get them talking and you can learn a tremendous amount about the business, about the industry that you serve. And then how can you develop solutions to meet those and really embodying that in the startup has paid huge dividends. And so 6 years later, we're still a tiny little business, about $12 million, but it's fun. Oh, by the way, one of the side benefits is one of the industries that I get to service is the whiskey industry and distilled spirits here in the States. It's been fun.
Yeah, I know I would enjoy that industry as well. One of the things that I've heard even now in this conversation is how many times you have reinvented yourself. And I think it takes a lot of courage to start all over in a different industry that you know very little about. Talk to me a little bit about the courage that took, because a lot of people would think, okay, I've got this background with a big beverage company. There are lots of other beverage companies out there. Why wouldn't you just choose another or a different beverage company? They don't know what that really means to someone who's been in the cola wars, but you've actually gone from a beverage industry to an ingredient industry to now you're working with almost micro ingredients where you just said you had to start all over and admit, hey, I don't know the level of detail that I feel comfortable, that I would need to know working with customers. That's got to take some courage. Where does that come from?
Well, I must confess, 13 and a half years ago, it was, I won't say that I approached it with the most pristine of motives, right? Because I viewed the opportunity to stay in St. Louis and keep the family in St. Louis. And I thought, well, I know a bit about sales and key account management and sales management. So I'll just do this gig for a couple of years until I find something that I really like. And you're right. The beverages were very comfortable for me. And so I didn't necessarily approach it with the correct mindset. But what I did do is I thought, well, I'm in it. So a job worth doing is worth doing right. That's an old adage from my dad from years ago when I was in grade school. Started getting out and working with my team, with my field team, and meeting customers. And what I found, and really the reinvention from Coke to AB Mauri was far more challenging than the one into the startup. You would have thought a startup with not managing a hierarchy anymore would have been challenging, and it had its challenges, but that was daunting at first. But once I got around people that were servicing that industry, the bakers, there's a tremendous amount of passion there. And that's what I was gravitated towards. There's the pride and passion in baking. I know it doesn't, to everybody, it doesn't sound all that cool, but it really is. It's the breadbasket of America. And these people take a lot of pride in what they do. The types and varieties of breads and sweet goods and tortillas and donuts. And you hear this passion and it's infectious. And then you go, wow, I can actually do something with this. I can resonate at a emotional level because these guys are emotional, these guys and gals. Yeah. And so it wasn't long. It was probably about 6 months on the job and having done probably about 60% travel just to get to know the industry and the people and the customers, that is like, I like this industry. And so I became a student, not only understanding what their hot buttons were, but how our yeast and ingredients fit in with their needs. Yeah, I became very, very passionate about it myself. So it was infectious. It actually came from the customers that then embodied in terms of how I managed the team.
One of the things we talk about, transferable principles, especially in this management and leadership space, and the father of modern day management is Mr. Drucker, Fred Drucker. And one of his quotes that you've listed as being one of your favorite is, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And there's a nuance there that if you're not careful, you might miss. But that nuance is so important to the difference between management and leadership. Just talk to me a little bit about why that quote is at the cornerstone of how you approach the work that you do, whether it's in a big beverage company or if it's growing a startup from zero to multi-million dollars.
Yeah, so that Peter Drucker quote is probably analogous to somebody viewing a position as a job versus somebody viewing a career track. You can do a job, you can manage things, you can manage projects, you can deliver on results, but where's the passion in that, right? Where do you develop actual followership and getting the individuals that ultimately are going to give you that high leverage result to buy into that? Because if you don't, yeah, you can drive people to do stuff, and hey, here's your performance appraisal. Here's what I need you to do, and you can micromanage them, and you can get results for a period of time, but you get burnout, you get lack of buy-in, and ultimately, long term, you really don't accomplish and truly grow the business in a value-added way. Leadership, on the other hand, is having your people see that you're passionate about it and them wanting to fall into line and actually do the same thing, right? And emulate that.
Yeah, I see so many managers get it wrong, and they try to do the very thing that you described. I mean, they try to micromanage, they try to command and control, and because they get immediate results, they continue to do that. Why do you think it's so tempting to want to micromanage and make people do what you think they need to do? Why do you think that's so tempting for managers, particularly young managers?
Well, I think it's easier. It's easier to develop a set of key performance indicators and then track, rank, and publish people. It's very black and white. It's on paper, and you can use that as a tool for driving results. And I'm not speaking out against that by any stretch. You certainly have to measure results and you have to track progress. But if that's the sole way of managing a team, the team will turn, right? What'll happen is the ones that think outside the box, the ones that really do have the new innovative ideas and approaches, they'll get burned out. They're going to feel like they're put into a box, and what'll be left is a bunch of people that think just like you, and don't do it quite as well as you do.
Yeah, another Drucker quote that I love, although I have corrected Mr. Drucker. Mr. Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I thought that was a nice attempt, but I've improved upon Mr. Drucker's words. I think culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and midnight snack, because culture is absolutely everything. If you don't have the right culture, then it really doesn't matter what you're talking about in the boardroom, because there's not going to be anyone around to execute. So I just love this distinction that you made about leadership is doing the right things as opposed to just trying to focus on doing things right. And it's much more challenging to be a leader, but it's so needed. We all have experiences where we didn't quite show up the right way as a leader. I could spend the next 3 hours listing the ones that I've stepped into. But I found that it's those mistakes that I've made that's helped me to grow. And so the next time I would approach things, I still may not know what to do, but I know I'm not going to do that. What have been some experiences that you've learned from that at the time they may have been painful or they may have appeared to be insignificant, but looking back, it really did change the way that you were approaching this leadership space?
Yeah, the first time that I ever managed people was Coca-Cola Enterprises. I had moved from the Coca-Cola company being an individual contributor and moved over to the bottler distributor, and was given an opportunity to manage a key accounts department in St. Louis. So it's 8 people. So I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish. I knew the metrics. I knew what my general manager wanted me to do. Early on, I would go on sales calls, and I had all of them were really good salespeople, but there were a couple that were really exceptional. And it took a couple of key meetings with grocery chains and convenience chains, and then afterwards, I mean, hats off to them. I won't mention names, but hats off to them to point out and say, you know what, Greg, I can actually do my job. So I actually don't need you jumping in on a joint sales call to do the selling for me. That's what you pay me to do. And so I had a couple of individuals that pointed it out to me, and I'm really glad they did. It was like one of those light bulb moments that, hey, if I'm going to be a leader, it's probably less important for me to make the sale. Well, there's not enough of me to do that, right? So I got 8 people to do it, but it's really, I'm going to be much more successful in my job if I can create an environment where they can be their best. But not that it was, done it perfectly. And I also have another favorite adage: you learn something new every day. So I continue to try to improve on the way I approach things.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lesson that many leaders run up against, and hopefully they learn from it. And it's so tempting, because usually the way that you get promoted into management is by being an amazing individual contributor. And then the day after you get promoted, you're asked not to do that thing that you've been so amazing at doing. Don't do that anymore. And so that's really, really hard. And so I'm not surprised that you ran into that, especially after being such a high performer. Another quote that you talk about is Colin Powell. I'll let you share the quote that you like from him, because I've just really liked a lot of what he represented, both in his position in the military and then his position when he stepped into the administration. I just liked the sense of calm that he provided and the sense of assurance that he provided. So go ahead and share your story and why you cite him as being one of your key leadership models.
Yeah, I had heard this quote. Gosh, it was a couple decades ago when I was really on the rise at Coca-Cola, and kind of every couple of years getting a promotion, and by all measures being successful at what I was doing. And it resonated with me at that time. And then I heard it again recently. I can't even remember where. It may have even been one of those quotes that come over LinkedIn or something like that. But it was like, oh my gosh, it was like this, all the emotions that when I heard it originally came rushing back to me. It was poignant then, and it's every bit as poignant today. And what he said is that leadership is all about people. It's not about organizations. It's not about plans. It's not about strategies. It's about people, motivating people to get the job done. You have to be people-centered. And that was, as a younger manager a couple decades ago, was like, wow, it gave me an opportunity to be introspective. Now today, leading, teaching, and coaching a much, much smaller team, but kind of continuing to grow this startup. It's just as important as ever before. If I don't motivate my people, it's not going to get done. If I'm not people-centered, if I don't treat them with respect, if I don't communicate properly, if I don't show a bit of humility and leading by example, they're not going to fall in line and sign up for it. Fall in line is really not the right word. It's sign up for the vision. To get behind it and embody the same passion you've got.
Yeah. I have said a couple of times that command and control has its place because it is expedient, but at best, you only get what you ask for. And that's if you're lucky, right? And if you can step into the more inspirational kind of leadership, where, to your point, people enroll, they sign up, they raise their hand and say, yeah, I will follow you. You get the opportunity for pleasant surprises. They'll give you what you asked for, and then they'll give you a few things that you didn't know that you needed. I really need those pleasant surprises because I don't know everything that I need. I've got an idea, I've got a plan. I certainly have a vision, but heck, I don't know everything that's going to come. And if the people that I'm supposed to be leading, if they don't feel enrolled enough to say, hey, boss, here's this other thing that's out there that you didn't fit into your strategy. You think we might want to go left instead of down the hill right? That's pretty important. Have you had experiences where even though you had brilliant plans, someone in your organization said, Mr. Boss, here's this other thing that you didn't notice, and that ended up making all the difference in the world?
Oh, yeah, certainly. I mean, there have been many examples of that. And why don't I pull off of something a little bit more recent, which would be kind of in this startup, right? So I grown into different roles. And so a little over 6 years ago, when I started this business unit and literally from nothing, and I did all this research and I built all these business cases. I spent a solid year studying in depth 6 different industries, going to trade shows, talking to customers. And so I had a pretty good idea of like I said, where to play and how to win, to use a little bit of strategy lingo there. And then I started to hire technical professionals, winemaker, master distiller, and bioethanol person, and so industry experts. And so I had it all worked out in my mind because I had spent so much time poring over the data and building the business case, and there were several instances where I had it all mapped out. Even did research on competition, and once I put some feet on the street and got real customer intel from the coalface, it was like, wow, I hadn't actually considered that reaction from the competitor. I hadn't actually really thought about positioning because I wasn't a technical expert by any stretch in terms of the ingredient functionality in the industries. What I knew is that what was sold into it, but really hadn't thought through the touch points, what made that important in the delivery to the various customers. And it really changed our selling approach in a couple of different instances, particularly in winemaking and actually, interestingly enough, in distilling. So.